7 of Voices of CX podcast, still bringing you the best thought leaders, practitioners, and academics of the industry, but this time with a renewed focus on the human touch. Empathy is our key word, and we're going all out on discussing how conversations can reshape experiences and your business inside and out. No matter how big your business is, what your challenges are, or your industry, connecting with your customers and their decisions is essential to leading through empathy. Welcome to season 7 of Voices of Customer Experience podcast. I'm still kind of shocked that we're in season 7 because it's been a long ride, but today I am joined by the CEO and founder of ARCET Global, Mark Hamill. Hey, Mark. Hello.
Hi, Mark.
You've got such a recognizable name. It's got so much clout. How do you deal with that in general, with a world full of crazy Star Wars fans?
It depends. It depends who it is, but usually quite well. I was used to, all my teachers used to make fun of me, so it was from I was a young age.
That's not a bad thing to be made fun of, I gotta say.
Yeah, that's true.
Did your parents do it on purpose? Let's talk about this for a second, because when you were born, Star Wars already come out.
Exactly. And the I don't know whether I've told you this one before, but my mother's maiden name is Walker as well. So it is ridiculous. It is just absolutely ludicrous. So I don't even know what they were thinking, but yeah.
Did you carry your mom's maiden name? Or
I probably should have interchanged between the two.
Would have been amazing. You could have been Mark Walker Hamill. I'm going to have to cut this part out of the podcast or just leave it for entertainment value.
Yeah, so that was a strange one as well. But yeah, usually 50% of people pick up on it, I would say.
That's awesome. Well, I'm going to have you start off, Mark, by introducing the non-Star Wars part of your life and a little bit of your career and how you landed in your current role. And then talk a little bit about your current role, just to kind of get people acclimated to this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess my career kind of started by accident. And I know a lot of people are probably in that same position, but when I was graduating from university, it was during the financial crisis, 2008, 2009. And I looked around what was the opportunities in the UK where I'm from and where I went to university, and just thought, well, why not look further afield? And I was always curious by Dubai, and ended up actually going there on holiday and applying for a few jobs. And within 2 months, I was living there in my first job, and that job was in a customer experience consultancy, or customer service as it was known then. So I kind of fell into this world of customer experience by accident. Started as a salesperson, then marketing manager, and then got into the events space, particularly in awards and conferences. So that's how I really got into this. That was 2011, 2012, started that. And then 2013, set up my first company in Dubai. So I was there for 10 years in Dubai in total. And in 2019, set up ARCET Global and moved back to the UK and still have an office there. And still very much in the awards and recognition and events business, but also we do a lot of consultancy and training as well. So that's actually where the name ARCET comes from. So it's awards recognition, consultancy, events and training.
Oh, well, it's a very descriptive name, I would say. But yeah. How much of what of the awards part is focused solely on customer oriented events?
All of them at the moment. So we have 3 programs around the world, one in North America, one in Europe, and then we have the World Series. So that we get people from all over the world participating in that. But we do run awards as, I would say, private awards, should we say? So companies that want to run awards, we would lend our expertise for them. So whether it be chambers of commerce, business associations. So we do run other awards, which could be from a wide variety of backgrounds. But the ones that we've got at the moment are pretty much business associations or chambers of commerce.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mark, as a marketer myself, that sounded really weird. But as a marketer, I get a lot of publications, a lot of emails from different awards companies and
Yeah,
magazines wanting to present me with awards. And in general, that's always associated with some cost and some
yeah.
fee. And it feels kind of scammy most of the time. Is that most of the award world? Is that something that you're trying to break down, or like a notion that you find yourself having to combat on a regular basis? Like, hi, we're not one of those regular awards that, pay me
Yeah,
$5,000 and I'll hand you an award.
yeah, absolutely. And I've had people say that the other way around, how much does it cost to win an award? And we're like, it's not the way it works. But
Mm-hmm.
whether an award is scammy or not is, it's not for me to say, but I think it sits with their objectives of why they're running awards in the first place. So,
Mm-hmm.
if a magazine is running an awards, um, I would say from the ones I've seen, certainly, and that this isn't all of them, some are very good, but a
Mm-hmm.
lot of them are traditionally it's about making money out of that particular event.
Mm-hmm.
And events like, for example, I've participated before, without naming names, they tell everyone who's won in advance, and then um, and they have 90 winners. That's an event and that was actually the reason why I ventured in to set up my own business, because this was a very well-known awards. And I
Mm-hmm.
went as part of my research and sat down at my table, and they said, here's the 90 winners for this evening. You have 15 seconds to say thank you on stage. And if you want to buy your trophy afterwards, it's $350. So that is some of those out there, but there are some really legitimate ones. And just, I don't think whether there's any better way if you have a certain set of objectives, but the way we do it is it's all about transparency and knowledge sharing. So the amount of awards that I think any of the listeners have been to where they have no idea what anyone did,
Mm-hmm.
um, we're the opposite. So every company that is participating in our awards can view a video presentation that was submitted as part of the assessment process
Mm-hmm.
from any of their competitors, whether they're in their category or not. So very, very little time, or very few times over my career, certainly people have contested why they haven't won. And if they have, we say, well, here's the case study. So
Mm-hmm.
and the idea of that knowledge sharing is part of our business as well. So ensuring that people are learning from others.
Right.
If you are finishing second, third, fourth, whatever it may be, you can learn from the ones at the top or other peers in other categories. So, and then the feedback reports as well. So anyone that does submit gets feedback from the judges, who are all independent. We don't do any of the judging.
Mm-hmm.
So they can learn for next time as
Yeah,
well.
that's what I was
So
going to ask. Is your jury, let's say, composed of a guild of like customer experience practitioners, or are they pre-selected? How does that part work, choosing the jurors?
there's a mix, I would say, of how we would do it, and also a mix in terms of their backgrounds as well. I'm quite persistent with my team to make sure that we do try and get as good a blend as possible of consultants, practitioners, and technology providers in this space. I think it's important to not just have one type. So having that diversity of outlook on certain projects really helps. But in terms of how we recruit, some come to us directly, some are recommended to us, and then some we are doing outreach because we think they would be a very good fit, for example. So it really depends how they come our way. But one thing that I would say, since if compared to this time last year, I think we have a bit of continuity with the judges now.
Mm-hmm.
We've had two events, and then a lot of those judges from those two events have filtered into our World Series. So they know the process, what to expect, and the fact they've come back, we're delighted with as well. So they've seen value in learning from these case studies, not just scoring them or the fact that we promote them, but I think they are learning what's best in the market as well, which is good.
Yeah. And how many submissions of case studies do you think you get? I mean, I know you're growing every day, so it's
Mhm.
hard to estimate what the next event series is going to look like. But do
Yeah.
you have some sort of an average of how many case studies are submitted for recognition?
Uh, I would say probably we're talking about 180, I think. And the reason why I say that is when we got to, I'm not sure you even know this, Mary, but the close of entries for the North American Awards was the end of March 2020. So you can imagine a lot of those companies dropped out, and we were at 150 at that point. And then I think towards the end of the process, it was like 89. And the European Awards was something similar. But then if you look at the World Series, which we just closed entries last week, I think we're on 290 entries. So it's that's not normal. That's something that would be well above what I've been involved in. But traditionally, I would say between 150 and 180 would be standard. And that doesn't mean everyone gets shortlisted, of course not. But and some don't make the cut. Some don't. They enter or actually register to enter and then don't necessarily submit the right documentation in time. So, but the event would usually have around 50 to 75 companies competing who would enter one or multiple categories.
Well, you kind of alluded a bit to my next question, which was, what was 2020 like? Because most events were canceled, postponed, went into some weird hybrid version, or in general, most event companies really, really struggled last year. How did you figure it out? What did you do?
It's a good question, and it was a very difficult time. I remember the moment when we decided, we're not going to renew the lease on our office, and it was probably a 10-day period where we thought we have to do something here. So didn't renew the lease in the office. Everyone was working remotely, and at the end of that 10-day period, we just decided, right, we're going to do them online. And the reason why we did them online and we felt they were successful is because it goes back to what I said about the content. We are a content-driven event, essentially. So we are not a typical awards where it is trophy and nice meal and a few speeches. That would be impossible for us to replicate or anyone to replicate properly. And then we looked at how we could, what's best practice out there currently. So that we're talking April and May and I think everyone was learning as they were going at that stage. And then we were also probably looking at what not to do. And there was even more examples of that. Because a lot of companies were trying to put a physical event through an online platform, and it's just not possible. I don't think there's so many different elements to it. The build-up as well is quite important. So because you don't have those moments of serendipity where you bump into someone, and we've talked about that at length as well, Mary, like what you like about events is that serendipity or sitting face-to-face with someone.
Yeah.
We all like that, of course, but that doesn't necessarily happen. So it has to be structured. It has to be much more structured. It has to be planned meetings in advance. Even if it's not really at the event, it can be done in advance. So we were arranging meetings for people in advance of the event, at the event. The software that we had was exceptional for the networking side of things. So those are the things that work well. And then all the content. So we had all the presentations. So around about 30 to 40 hours worth of content per event, and then access to that content after the event. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we did, but it was tough at the time. And I think it's going to be difficult to replicate the very sales driven events like big trade shows, for example. I think they're going to find it challenging. Hybrid events, I think our vision of what hybrid events will look like if we do them would be quite different, where we would have maybe something offline which isn't directly linked up to the event, but how that'll look, we're not sure. But it depends on demand in the cities that we have or the companies that we have demand from, what cities they're in. So it's kind of a watch this space at this stage, but continue as we did last year and build on that. We definitely had some learnings as well.
The last event that I went to in person was Customer Contact Week in Nashville last January. So it's been a year since I was last at an event. And it's interesting because you've got those like conference circuits, and it's kind of the same people, it's the same crowd, especially the kind of trade showy, like let's say events. And people were like, oh, I'm so tired of this. It's always the same thing, blah, blah, blah. At this point, I would expect that people are desperate to get back out there and
Yeah.
kind of reestablish that human connection, that power of networking face to face,
Yeah.
of the simple events that sometimes happen. Like, I would say the most valuable conversations that I've had at conferences have happened over coffee breaks
Yeah.
or over a post-event drink during the happy hour. And I do believe that when all of this comes back, there will be a renewed interest. Okay, granted, it might not be the same way. It might be a mixture of hybrid and in person, but I
Yeah.
believe that when it comes back, it'll come back strong. Like
Yeah.
any other venue, like concerts. I think that people are going to flock back to concerts. People are going to flock back to events as soon as the world is somewhat safe again, because people miss that. People miss that connection that events provide. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I see if for the companies that are able to to make it through this time and survive this period of transition, I see a strong future. How do you
Yeah.
see it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the everyone wants that. I think most people would say that, and it's the difference is the circumstances that people would need in their life to do that, to make that leap, let's say. And I think that's the challenge. So, and it sounds like a most ridiculous analogy, but the way we were talking about it at the time, that 10-day period I referred to um, was like an onion. So we're like, there might be a layer in the center that might be 30% of our customers that might be absolutely fine with coming to an event. Now, bearing in mind, this is April when we're talking about it, I mean, without the restrictions or anything, but this is the analogy we use. And then maybe there's another 20% that would, on this circumstance, then there's 20% beyond that that might not be able to because their company won't let them travel. So I think it really depends on those different circumstances, and how that would influence the scale of events. But I think the demand is certainly there for most people. I think people would like to go back to events, but whether what would have to happen for them to go to the events is a different question. So I think they will come back. I think there's too much to lose from like in terms of the big trade shows and those venues. That they need to be full. So I think as long as there is demand there, those will be full again. But whether they go back to what they were before, I think it might take a couple of years at least.
Yeah, like I imagine like big events like HubSpot's Inbound, that is
Hmm.
just thousands of people, or
Yeah,
even Social Media Marketing Week, which is a gigantic event.
yeah,
And everybody's walking in and out, and you've got, 20 different breakout session rooms. I don't know how that's going to be. I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody's trying to be flexible and everybody's trying to think of ways to make it happen.
yeah.
But I expect that 2021 may not be the year of these big events coming back just yet. What do you think?
It depends where it is as well. I mean, there's some like I know, for example, that was having big events last year. So, I know Dubai is a special place, and the demographics are very different. They're a much younger population, but still, I mean, it depends where they are. I don't think there's going to be many. I don't even know what the percentage would be of those big events that would happen compared to 2019, for example, in Europe
Hmm.
and North America. But it remains to be seen. I know there's definitely people that are planning for even end of Q2 that
Hmm.
I've seen. Um, and people, the thing is, customers are comfortable if they are getting pushed out.
Hmm.
I don't think anyone's going to rush to book their travel for these events anyway.
Hmm.
So if something is planned for June and it works, great. But they know that the customers they have will probably be fairly happy, or well, let's say understanding if it
Hmm.
gets pushed out to end of Q3 or early Q4, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So and they'll have got their customer feedback from the virtual events that they probably ran, and
Hmm.
they'll probably see actually, yeah, we would love to go back to physical events and build it around that. You'd like to think anyway.
So it seems like you and your team have kind of got it figured out, at least how to navigate 2021. So let's talk a little bit about the value that you're bringing to the table to organizations that do choose to submit their case studies to companies who want to be a part of the vision that you're creating? What's the
Yeah.
greatest value that you feel you're adding?
Greatest value we're adding. I mean, for me, I think it's the recognition piece, like the opportunity to go out of your day to day. I would say day to day in the office, but not many of us are in office. I think you're the only one, Mary, that I know that's there every time. But yeah, the opportunity to work with your team on putting your story out there is something that you don't really get very often. And the fact that your story is getting told, not just going into an awards process and then winning an award, you actually are telling your story because you're creating video content, which is then shared amongst hundreds of other CX professionals from around the world. But I think one of the things I always say is people enter awards for different reasons. So, or multiple reasons. So some people really just want to win. That's it. They don't care about anything else, and that's fine. And some people want that recognition piece purely for themselves. Some want it for their teams. And then some people bizarrely want to do it so they can elevate their personal profile to look elsewhere for jobs. So there's a host of reasons we've found over the years why people do it. But the value is definitely in the recognition. And from a company perspective or team, apart from the recognition, I think the feedback that they get from these experts, that can be really helpful for the next iteration of that project or campaign, or just in future projects and campaigns that they'll be working on.
And what do you see more of? Is it organizations that are submitting their own customer experience projects, or is it a vendor alongside a client that together developed a program, or maybe a consultant or something of the sort?
It's a bit of a mix, I would say, but at the moment it's around 60 to 65% is company submitting on behalf of themselves. But we're increasingly getting strategic communications agencies, and also, as you rightly said, so vendors and consultants, because especially for consultants, they're working on those specific projects with the client, so it's in their benefit, and it's how they position it. So some of them do it just they would name it as the company name, the actual name of the winner, for example, or it's in collaboration with, and the same for the vendors as well. But it's a real mix, and as it is a project, initiative, or campaign they're submitting, it can be that way. So we're not looking at a company as a whole in any of the categories.
hmm Well, I know that you said at the beginning that it was kind of accidental that you ended up in kind of a customer forward or customer related
Yeah.
awards market. But what is it that drove you to continue down this path once you decided to open up your own organization? What is it about customer centricity that fuels or propels your business to move forward?
It's a very good question. And I just find it fascinating, first and foremost. And I know it can help people. I think it's just something that I've noticed over the years that ties a lot of things together. And really when you see the penny drop for people, like they're kind of in their day-to-day role, and there's not really cross-functional communication or collaboration, and the culture isn't quite right in companies. And I've seen that so many times over the years that like being more customer centric can make their lives better, not just their customers' lives.
hmm
But and I just find that very fascinating and enjoy doing what I do.
hmm
And fundamentally, I'm one of those people that has to enjoy what what they're doing, and I really enjoy this space. And yeah, I think it was very lucky that I fell into this when I was much younger, and
hmm
yeah, looking forward to continuing down that road. But like the idea that we're working more not just on the awards and events side of things or training, I'm actually involved in quite large scale transformation projects as well now, which is giving me I'm learning every day on
hmm
that side as well. So yeah, this part is definitely by design. I would say it might have been accident at the beginning, but it's definitely by design now.
And how about some of the trainers that you work with that are really well known and beloved in this industry? to name a couple, Ian Golding, who's one of my favorite people in the whole world. Love you, Ian, if you're watching this. There's Diane Majors, who's also been a guest on this podcast. And you've got a close relationship with the international CX communities in a lot of different countries. What is it that, first of all, why do you work so closely? Well, that makes sense. Forget it. Forget my question. I'm going to go back to another one. What is it that makes you so inspired about working with the international community? Because for me, when I talk to people around the world, it seems like there's always a different vibe. There's always a different moving force behind international CX movements. And most of the time, you can boil it down to a very small group of individuals that are catalysts in their industries. So is that something that you've noticed as well working internationally, or is that just me?
No, you're absolutely right. It is. It's like, and I guess when I look at the sort of work that we do with chambers as an example, some of them are very active and some of them aren't. And in certain community, and it does boil down to like a small group of people that really are passionate about what they do. There's some cities where it's really taken off. I think just before we started, we were talking about certain cities that really are regulars in watching the podcast. So yeah, I think the passion is out there. It's just the expertise. And also the one thing I would say, learning from my experience in the UAE, it really is different. It's remarkable how different each market is. So there's some things that they really focus on that perhaps it wouldn't be something that in Europe or certain countries in Europe wouldn't focus on, Western Europe in particular. So it just depends what they're, and that is guided, I guess, by those small group of passionate people. But one thing I would say is that there's a lot of countries out there that probably have a lot more customer experience professionals than let's say the average, but there isn't a community there that is tying them all together, and they don't meet regularly. It's very disparate. So without naming any names of those countries, but yeah, there's ones I've experienced where I'm like, there seems to be a lot of people coming from this place, but they don't know each other. They've never had any events. There's no events there. So in terms of how we can help, our community events like our webinars that we run, or our events at the awards and the conferences that we run, it can tie them together. And we've had instances where we have run webinars or community events in those types of countries where there is a very disparate community, and then offer some thought leadership through the likes of Diane or Ian or Stefan Osthaus, who we work with as well. So yeah.
And which countries would you say are the most active in customer experience? Now you're going to have to name names. You've spent this entire podcast not naming names. Now you have to name names.
Because it's positive. Because it's a positive thing. Yeah,
Yes.
Exactly. I have to say the UAE is very active. And I suppose that goes back to the nature of the market. Dubai in particular is very active. There's a lot of
I've noticed that. I have
there.
a lot of connections that are in the Middle East in general, like not even just exclusively the UAE, but also in Saudi Arabia and some surrounding countries, even Egypt, that are really, really passionate about it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that part of the world's, it's leading in some aspects. I think particularly with the GCC, so UAE and Saudi in particular, they are investing a lot of money in training people, more than I've seen in the West, for example. UK is extremely active, although we don't do very much work, even though we are based there. There is a lot of activity there. There's a lot of CX professionals. And then in pockets around the States, I think certain cities like Atlanta, it appears to be a lot of activity. Dallas, we do. I'm very biased. Nashville.
Nashville is one of my favorite CX cities. And again, I'm going to say that one of the catalysts of that is Nate Brown, who is like a really, really passionate guy. And he's based in Nashville. And he, for a while, he was the head of the CXPA Nashville chapter. And
Hmm.
he really created this really nice ecosystem. Every time I go in town, I try to go to the CXPA events in Nashville. And I'm always blown away about, by how collaborative and how united they are, even more so than Atlanta.
Really? Yeah,
Hmm.
because it's the ones that I've seen is definitely that Atlanta and Dallas were the
Dallas,
two big ones.
Chicago as well, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So there's
Yeah.
definitely pockets around the states as well. And then our mutual friend, the ninja that is Bruno in Brazil.
Bruno.
So
Yeah.
um, he's he's exceptional in terms of the community he's building
Yeah.
there. But and Australia, Anita Siasios has been very active in Melbourne and
Hmm.
with market culture in Sydney as well. So there are pockets around there, but there's definitely potential in some
Hmm.
countries and still many countries actually. And
Do you find
it's
that
the
that these like smaller pockets, the reason they might be more active or more passionate, perhaps, is because they have less resources at their disposal? Like in the US and in the UK,
Mhm.
there's such a strong movement. Like there are so many
Yeah,
CX influencers, there's so much material being put out. Like I know that Brazil has this really strong movement that I would say is being led by Bruno and by Chris and by their
hmm,
team at Amigos do CX.
yeah,
And they're really really making this movement into something really special, and
hmm,
they're developing material, they're developing like universities and all of these things.
yeah,
But in general, what I've seen, and I've shared this before on this podcast with other guests, is that they don't have access to the resources that we have very easily, and that makes them so much more passionate about participating, partaking, and consuming
yeah,
content in the industry. So, I mean, I think it's really cool. They're not burnt out yet, I think, to a certain degree, where we kind of are CX'd out to many degrees. Like we've already heard a lot of the stuff. There's
hmm,
not that much innovation going on in the industry. So we're already a little bit more passive, but they still have that passion
yeah.
for creating and generating and talking about it, which I think is amazing.
Yeah, it's like it's the evangelical side of it is still there, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I suppose it comes. We're very lucky that we're English speaking in English speaking
Hmm.
countries. They're translating a lot of stuff, and it's not. And it's the same when I was in the UAE. Was involved in translating things to Arabic, or it's the same around the world. So if you're the first to have a book or course in Portuguese or Arabic or wherever it may be, it's a pretty big deal,
Yeah.
to do that. So that I can understand that that's the kind of shift in mindset in the UK and the States. But um, yeah, I think that it depends on the nature of the industries that they have there as well, or in certain countries. So some countries might be more. Not any country that has a big focus on finance is going to have a lot
Hmm.
of CX professionals.
Yeah.
Telcos anywhere in the world as well. We
They're very
noticed.
problematic across the board, universally problematic, right? Telcos.
Yeah, well, it's just the legacy and the,
Yeah.
the, the way the way it works. They buy up smaller telcos in different, or providers. So it's just kind
Mhm.
of and bit, nuts and bolts trying to fit things together. So just the nature of the industry. But yeah, there's lots of opportunities, and some ones are doing it really well, I have to say.
And how are you? I would say that there's not much of it. It's easier to transition virtually when it comes to training, isn't it?
Hmm.
Because at this point, we're so used to having like e-learning and Zoom classes, et cetera. That might even be a positive thing. It reduces travel expenses and venue expenses, et cetera. Do you feel like
Yeah,
training will move into a permanently virtual model, or do you see it being hybrid?
it depends what it is, I have to say. So, for example, if training, which is and it sounds very obvious, but a training course which is content based and this telling the stories around content, I think that works really well.
Hmm.
If it is training with an element of collaboration and where you have to really work as a team, so if it's, let's say, cross-functional teams in a bigger company,
Hmm.
I think having that face to face where you can hash out what the problems are, what the solutions are, it's so difficult to do,
Yeah.
to be perfectly honest. And there's no choice at the moment, but I can't imagine that would remain like that. Should things go back to normal? But I think anything that is, let's say, curricula focused and someone telling or explaining it and telling the stories around that, I think that can remain. And as long as there's regular screen breaks, and it's not, again, going back to what I said about large events, it's the same for training. It's not trying to force physical training through a virtual mechanism.
Right.
Or media. It's completely different thing.
Yeah. Going back to Ian Golding, I saw his masterclass last year, and if it hadn't been in person, it would have been an entirely different experience, because not only does he train people about customer experience, he offers that experience as well in his masterclass. So he's very hands-on and very kinesthetic about the way that he passes on knowledge. And so like that is definitely one aspect that I would like to see continue. I would like to still have in-person master classes and training. I think that it would, at least for me, it makes a really big difference. I get really, really bored just staring at a screen. Whereas when you're interacting, not only are you feeding off of the presenter, you're feeding off of your colleagues as well, and the energy that they're bringing to that event.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I think it really depends on the situation. I think, again, what we're talking about is travel restrictions or how comfortable businesses are in bringing people in. But I think it's just a basic human need to learn in a group. But in terms of, I do think that one day courses, maybe even the ones in particular, like when it comes to like certification where you have to get specific bits of information, I think they will be online. But the ones where it is more collaborative, I think certainly going back to face-to-face is the way to go. But we'll see how it goes, I think.
Great. So what's in store for ARCET Global for 2021? You already talked about it lightly, but can you give us dates and names so that our listeners can stay in tune and maybe even tune in if they're all virtual?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like the awards that we have, we've got the World Series in May, and then we have the North American and European awards. So European and then North American awards in September and October. They are open to enter now, and I'll share the links after. And then we also have customer-centric culture certification courses, which are running at the moment. So those are the things that we're really focusing on, along with the talent management solutions that we've got. That's a different story altogether, but those are the real things.
Talent management. Well, okay, we haven't even addressed that yet. Is it also in the customer centricity, customer experience realm?
Yeah, it would be more in the employee experience realm,
Okay.
I would say. So it's predictive talent management. So it's all about understanding what a person's real needs are. So it's not your typical behavioral or psychometric test. It's more predictive. It looks at a person's EQ, actual values, and then how that influences their behavior and whether they're in the right role. So it's very, very mathematical, I must say. But we've partnered with a company, and they've been doing this for a number of years. I've taken the test. That's how I got into it, because it changed my life, I have to say. And it identified some things that I needed to change from a professional perspective, and that helped me with moving forward to my career. But that's one of the things. So very much from an employee experience perspective, and so whether it be from recruitment or personal development, or even to for mergers and acquisitions, retaining the right people. So that's a bit of a background on it, but it's something I'll send more information on after as well. Put a link in.
So we can find it all if we go to your website.
Absolutely, yeah. I can put a link in that. Yeah, that's in short, yes. I'll put
okay, great. Yeah. And if our listeners do want to get in touch with you and talk a little bit more about the opportunities and understand the recognition value that your company brings to the table, how can they do that?
Just let's say my email address, so mark@arcetglobal.com, or find me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's the real Mark Hamill is on LinkedIn, but if you've watched this podcast,
it's the one place where you're the only Mark Hamill.
Oh, you'd be surprised. Yeah, no, there's. I don't think he'd be on there. I would doubt it.
No,
Working
it's
for
more,
Lucasfilms.
yeah, an IMDb profile instead of a LinkedIn bio. That'd be great.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the best way to find me, as you know. So yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience and your point of view with us. And we look forward to seeing you in the future in more events and hopefully in person in the very near future.
Absolutely. And thanks for having me, Mary. I really appreciate it. Enjoyed it.
Awesome. That's our show. Thanks for joining us. We hope we've brought you one step closer to leading through empathy. It's our way of making the world a better place, one business at a time. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell if you want to know as soon as we publish a new episode. Voices of CX is brought to you by Worthix. I'm Mary Drummond. This podcast is hosted and produced by me, edited and co-produced by Steve Barry. See you next week.